Hello, today I just wanted to kind of go over my experience with the Berryman's piston soak. So I'll show you my car here. It's basically a 2012 Volkswagen GTI. It's got 237,000 miles, a lot of miles for this old car, but it's my daily driver. It's been consuming oil since I got it with about 124K on it. And it got so bad it was burning about 100 or a quart every 120 miles, which is absolutely absurd. So I knew I had to do something, and I really didn't feel like rebuilding the engine. So I went ahead and looked up on the internet on YouTube, and I found out about the Berryman's piston soak and figured I'd give it a shot. So what I did is I basically pulled out the spark plugs, rotated the crankshaft by hand until all cylinders were pretty even in their stroke, so kind of mid-stroke. And then I added approximately a third cup, maybe a little less, to each cylinder with the engine hot. And I let that sit. Actually, first I cranked it over 5 revolutions, like it shows on YouTube, on many of the YouTube videos, by hand, of course. And just cranked it over 5 revolutions. You'll want to make a mark so that you can return right back to that spot easily. And then I let that sit about 4 hours. Then I came back and all that had drained down into the oil. So basically at that point I added another third cup to each cylinder and just kept repeating that process, turning the engine over by hand after adding a third cup to each cylinder for basically the time it took to go through 4 cans of that chemical. And didn't really know what to expect at that point, but I knew I had to try something, and that seemed like the cheapest and easiest way to potentially save me from having to rebuild this engine. So yeah, then basically I fashioned a small hose and sucked out the remaining with my shop vac, which is not advisable. It could explode on you if there's many fumes in there, but I went ahead and did it anyways. And I should have put oil in the cylinders just to kind of re-lube the piston rings, but I didn't. It's my first time trying this, but of course I drained my oil completely, put in a new oil filter, basically did an oil change at that point, put the plugs back in, tried to start it. It took probably at least 2 minutes of cranking on it to get the thing to finally start up, and it smoked like crazy. But then I drove it, and it was kind of crazy at first. I could hear like clanking in the engine, and I was scared I actually damaged my engine. But I believe it was the carbon pieces that broke loose and were floating around in the cylinders for a little while. But I just took it out with fresh oil. I drained out all the chemical, fresh oil change. I went and drove it about 80 miles really hard on some back roads, and that was pretty fun, but it got rid of that carbon noise in the engine. And then I just kept checking my oil every time I filled it up, and I was just absolutely amazed at how it just completely stopped the oil consumption issue, seemingly. It did end up going through its first quart after about 2,800 miles, almost 29, I believe. And so that was my quart that I had to add. And then now I'm getting ready to do my first oil change. And so I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys what my plan is. So that's the oil I've been running in it. It's a Valvoline European Blend 540, full synthetic. This is what I'm gonna go ahead and try today. Got a real good deal on it. There was a CarQuest that was closing down because they all are closing down on the West Coast here. And so I figured I'd try this on my first oil change on it after doing my piston soak and its oil change afterwards. And then here's the Berryman's B12. I got this at Walmart. This was only a little under $5 per can, so it's very inexpensive, very easy. It's something that I would recommend anyone try if they have the oil consumption issues like I did. One thing I'll show you though, you will want to pull the inner fender cover on this side on the passenger side so that you can access that crankshaft pulley bolt. And I believe that was a 24 millimeter on that one. And then you'll want like a good size ratchet or breaker bar or something you can turn that over by hand with. It will get really difficult to turn it over as it dries out the oil off of the piston rings and out of the cylinders. But yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal, the results I got out of it. So I just wanted to share it with everybody just to show that it really can work. And then here, I'll turn this around so I can see. That's all right. So there's my mileage on the car. I don't know if you can see that, but 237,514. And then there's my trip meter. I actually went a little over 5,000. It's been raining here a lot, so I kind of put it off. But that's my trip that I set right after doing my piston soak. So those are my real world results. No BS, it really did work for me with this high mileage Volkswagen that I love so much. So just thought I'd share that with you all. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Thank you. Here are some of the basic tools you're going to need to complete this. Preferably a long handled ratchet like this. Socket 24 millimeter, I believe was the size. Little screwdriver, a little straight blade screwdriver to pop your little connectors off your coils to get those out of your way. 5/8 plug socket, 3/8 extension, long extension, 3/8 drive ratchet, then a little T25 Torx to get all your shields off underneath. And then this is kind of hokey, but I happen to have an extra one around, so I used my extra little coffee maker container to measure out my chemical. So in each cylinder, I believe I went up to this first mark. And that's how I set that up. And so on each cycle of soaking the piston, I would put that amount in the cylinder. I don't know exactly what that comes out to, but I figure around 1/3 of a cup, maybe a little more actually now that I'm looking at it. And then what I don't have here is my little funnel that I use to kind of guide it down in the cylinder. I mean, you could just pour it down in the cylinder. I would recommend blowing all the debris, any debris out of the plug hole before you remove your spark plug. So I'd highly recommend that, because you do not want any chunks of rock or dust or anything to go down inside your cylinder. So definitely blow those out with some compressed air. Be very careful not to get stuff down in there. And this chemical, when you pour it in, it will rinse anything that's in that hole down into your cylinder. So keep that in mind. But on top of that, of course, I had a floor jack so I could get it up and actually have room to get underneath. And then I had my shop vac fashioned with a small piece of hose that would fit down in the plug hole. And that was about it. So it's very simple. You know, you'll want to have your oil, of course, that you're going to put back in, and your new oil filter ready to go. And like I said before, I would highly recommend putting a little bit of oil down in your cylinder before you put your plugs in when you're done with this procedure. It'll make starting the engine so much easier, and it'll be so much better on your cylinder walls. I did not do that, but I should have. So that's about it.